This is your one and only 𝐈𝐸𝐻81 with your daily dose of video goodness, and today I'm going to show you how to build what is possibly the most busted dual wield build in Baldur's Gate 3. Let's get to it. There's a lot of back and forth in the community about which is better, going dual wield or using a two-handed weapon. A lot of people swear by the two-handed weapon, but I think many people are sleeping on dual wield. Dual wield gives you insanely high, consistent damage. Now, it is possible to do really nutty burst damage using a two-handed weapon. However, if what you're looking for is consistently high damage without having to proc 90 million different things in order to see your build's absolute potential, then dual wield is for you. So the build is relatively simple, but some people tend to make some mistakes with this build that is actually costing them in the long run. And we'll cover those mistakes as we go through this. So one of the nice things about this build is that you can just level into this build. There is no respecking involved, and you're just going to feel relatively strong throughout the entire time you are playing this character, and you're going to hit power spikes that are going to make you feel that much stronger. So you're going to start off by leveling your character as a fighter. You're going to start with the stats of 16 strength, 16 dexterity, 14 constitution, then 10 in wisdom and 10 in charisma, but honestly you could go 10 intelligence, 10 wisdom, 10 intelligence, 10 charisma. Just put those last remaining points wherever you want to put them. For your fighting style, you are going to choose two-weapon fighting. This states that when you make an attack with your offhand weapon, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the attack. This makes your offhand weapon's damage the same as your main hand weapon's damage. Well, provided they do the same amount of base damage to begin with. Once you hit level 3 in fighter, you're going to get to pick your subclass. The subclass you want to pick here is Battle Master. I highly advise choosing disarming attack because that gives you a chance to disarm your enemy, which gives you an absolutely massive advantage against them, along with precision attack, which just allows you to add additional damage to your basic attack, and riposte, which will give you a chance to attack the enemy when they miss by spending one of your superiority dice. At level 4, you get to pick your first feat, and the feat you are going to pick here is Dual Wielder. Now, up until this point, you should have just been using whatever the best weapon you have access to. Doesn't really matter, probably some big two-hander. Once you hit level 4 and you get this feat, you want to start using two weapons. This is going to boost your armor class, which you should already be wearing heavy armor, so it's going to give you one more than whatever your current armor is, which is just going to make you even harder to hit, and it's going to allow you 2 attacks per turn, one with your main action and then one with your bonus action. At level 5 fighter, you get the ability to attack twice, so now you should have 3 attacks per turn. At level 6, we are going to make the swap over to rogue, and you are going to level rogue for 4 levels. And at level 3, you are going to pick thief. This is going to get you 4 attacks per turn, and this is when your damage is really going to smooth out and you're going to see more consistent damage. And I'll explain why this gives you more consistent damage here in a minute, but let's finish the build first. So then you're going to go to 4 levels in rogue because we want that additional feat. And for that feat, we are going to pick ability improvements, and we are going to put 2 points into strength. This should put you at level 9. At level 10, we are going to actually swap back to fighter and pick up that additional feat, because when you hit fighter level 6, you get another feat. And for that feat, we are going to pick savage attacker. And at this point, at level 10, the build is complete. From this point on, put levels wherever you want them. It doesn't really matter because you only need 10 levels for this build to be absolutely insane. Now let's talk about a few things here. There's a lot of people out there that suggest going with dexterity and doing this build as a dex build. And you can do this build as a dexterity build. The problem with doing this build as a dexterity build is it severely limits the weapons you can use if you focus on dexterity, because you need finesse weapons in order to use the sneak abilities that you get from rogue. The issue with this is that the finesse weapons don't do nearly as much damage as a lot of other weapons that you have the option to equip if you level with strength. So you're giving up the ability to use one ability in order to make your average attack damage overall much higher and much more consistent. Now, you still have a decent amount in dex. We leveled dex to 16 for a reason, and that is because we can also do pretty good range damage. You want to equip 2 really good hand crossbows, and you can use the sneak ability with those hand crossbows. You just won't be able to use the melee sneak ability, and it's a pretty decent trade-off, as you can see from the footage that's on the screen. So I'm going to talk about gear choices that you can make here in order to improve the build anymore, and weapons that you should be looking for. But first, I want to talk about why this build is so much more consistent than choosing to go with a two-handed playstyle. And it all boils down to the the fact that you're rolling more dice. Ideally, what you want is 2 weapons that not only do their base weapon damage, but also have some other type of modifier on them as well. So for example, they deal psychic damage or force damage. If you do this for both weapons, so let's say you have 2 maces and both of those maces do their base damage of 1d8 plus a 1d4 of force damage. They're identical. You're rolling a total of 4 separate dice every time you attack. If you use a 2-handed weapon, for example, let's say you use a big 2-handed hammer that does force damage and its base damage, you're rolling a higher level dice. So for example, a 1d10, and then let's say you're rolling a 1d4 force dice, you're only rolling 2 dice. So you may get to attack 2 or 4 times with that 2-hander, but each time you attack, you're rolling less dice. And the difference here is pretty drastic. If you attack 2 times with a 2-handed weapon that rolls 2 dice, you're only rolling 4 dice. If you attack 2 times with 2 2-handed weapons that have 2 dice each, you're rolling 8 dice, which means your overall damage throughout the course of a fight is going to be a lot less spiky and more consistent. And because we don't limit ourselves to just finesse weapons, it's possible to find weapons that actually do really high damage. One of the best weapons I've found so far for this build are flails that drop really commonly in Act 2. They deal the highest secondary damage that I've seen. So most of your versatile weapons, when you swap to using them in a single hand, are going to roll a 1d8. You will get +5 to this damage, or you should get +5 to this damage once the build is complete. So it should be 1d8 plus 5 additional damage. So that's the base damage on these flails. They also do a 1d6 necrotic damage. Now, all of the other secondary damage like necrotic, psychic, force, all of that I've seen on other weapons, regardless of the situation of whether they're 1-hand, 2-hand, or what have you, deal a 1d4. So as soon as you can pick up a set of these flails, I highly advise using them. And then you want to grab any other gear that you can find that's going to just add flat damage to your attack. I have a set of gloves that add an additional 2, and then I have a ring that adds 2 acid damage. And then these flails that I'm using have a weapon enchantment of +1, so that just straight adds +1 to the damage. So earlier on, before you get a hold of these flails, try to find anything that you can add that adds additional damage, and if the weapon has a weapon enchantment of 2 or higher, choose those, because those are also going to just add the flat damage on top of any other damage that they do. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, but Firespark, when you go to fight undead or anything else that is resistant or immune to necrotic, you're going to take an absolute massive loss in damage there. And you are. That's why I also highly suggest just carrying a second set of weapons with you that do something other than necrotic damage, because both of our attacks will do necrotic damage. So it's a good idea to mix your other set of weapons up. So pick like psychic and lightning, or psychic and force, or force, and you get the idea. This way you're more prepared for when you have to fight something that is resistant to necrotic or immune to necrotic. Now, you're going to take a little bit of a loss in overall damage unless you're able to find something else that rolls an additional 1d6, which I haven't found. Not saying they don't exist in the game, just saying I haven't found them yet. But if you do have something that does 1d6 that's not necrotic, I would put that in one hand and one of the necrotic flails in the other hand and just run with that. Still keeping a second set of weapons in my inventory just in case, because you never know. Now, the great thing about flat damage stuff, so for example, like the gloves I have that add flat damage and the ring I have that adds acid damage, this also applies to our range damage as well. Now, you're gonna try to use this build to always be up close and personal with your enemies, but it's really nice to have that option for ranged if you need it. And while our range damage isn't anything nearly as good as our melee damage, it's still not terrible. I would call it middle of the road damage. And you also have to keep in mind that you still get 4 attacks with your range, the same as you do with your melee attacks. I would prioritize crossbows with an additional damage type or a very high weapon enchantment. Another really nice aspect of this build is you can actually mix up your attacks. So you could do 2 attacks at range with your sneak attack damage, for example, if something is next to an ally, and then run in and hit it with melee, or get the sneak attack as a surprise attack and then start the fight. And keep in mind, this is just 4 attacks every turn. This isn't counting if you are hasted. If you're hasted, you get 6 attacks per turn. On top of that, you also have your superiority dice, which you can add at any time to do additional damage on an attack. And that's pretty much it for this one. It's just a really simple, reliable, consistent damage build that will just absolutely melt anything that gets in front of you. All right, hopefully you found this video video helpful and informational? If you did, consider hitting the subscribe button and notification bell so you can be notified when I upload other videos. And if you're looking for some more Baldur's Gate 3 content, you can find a link to another one of my videos on the screen right now. I want to give an absolute massive shout out and thank you to all of my channel supporters for helping to keep these videos sponsor free. You all are absolutely amazing people. If you would like to become an official channel supporter, check out the links in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you're shy, you don't like to comment, just hit that thumbs up button and share your support. Until next time, thanks for watching.